even the biggest organisations that have strong balance sheets, it can go wrong very quickly if you don't have the right governance in place. And I've seen sporting clubs that are incredibly wealthy ending up on the verge of bankruptcy because of very poor governance. This requires a far more strategic perspective rather than just passion.
Kelly Reynolds. She was told she couldn't play football, not because she wasn't good enough, because she was a woman. That injustice didn't push Kelly away from sport, it made her one of its most powerful defenders. Today, Kelly is a managing director at Accenture, a former non-executive director at Golf Australia, chair of the Chief Executive Women in Western Australia, and a board-level advisor who's guided organisations through transformation at the highest levels of business and sport. She sat in the rooms where the hard decisions are made, and she knows exactly what goes wrong when the wrong people are making them. In this episode, Kelly pulls no punches on the real ROI of great club management, why passion alone will bankrupt your club, why wealthy sporting organisations from Cricket Australia to the ARU have been brought to their knees by poor governance, why cash slippage is your club's silent killer, why the greatest return your club will ever generate has nothing to do with money, and why the sports clubs that are standing still right now are already dying. So, if you're brave enough to hear the truth about your sports club, you've come to the right place. Kelly.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I'm really excited for this chat. We speak to a lot of sports clubs, and there's a very diverse range of problems within community sport at the moment. Some of them everybody is seeing and feeling, some of them a bit more isolated. And what I want to talk about today is the ROI of great club management. What's happening in community sport that's not working? What can clubs be doing better? Whether it's operationally or within the community, to build stronger profiles and establish that next stage of growth that can be mapped and tracked very tangibly. But before we go into that, why would you say you're the right person to be speaking about this?
Oh, look, I bring a different perspective. My heritage in sport has come about from sports governance. When I grew up in sport, the available sports for women to play was limited to netball and hockey. You literally were not actually legally allowed to play soccer or rugby or anything like that in my cohort of growing up. So I kind of feel I was part of a generation of women that just didn't have opportunity in sport afforded to me simply because I'm a woman. But I'm passionate about sport. My husband used to play professional rugby. And so over the last few years, I've developed, I suppose, some influence in sporting governance. I've sat on the board of Golf Australia. I've chaired something called Minerva Network for Western Australia, which is elite high performance women and supporting them with business mentors as they transition from elite high performance sport into their career, their second career after sport, which is usually in business. And so I have a huge passion about sport, but it came from the roots of being of the age and generation of female that we physically did not have the availability of opportunity given to us at that stage. And I think it's important that the next generation of women do, but actually still there's a lot of barriers in their way to overcome to enable them to have not even equality, but just equity in a sporting context. Yeah. So my narrative is more around governance, sporting governance, and how we increase a more diverse sporting field.
Yeah, it's an area where I have a lot of empathy for clubs in the community, because if we think about your ordinary sports club, it's probably volunteer driven by some mums and dads who maybe have children participating at the club, or they've been a fixture of this club within the community for many years and they want to help and they want to give back. But that rarely comes with the expertise and the background that's required to run a club in a really powerful way, whether that's fiscally and commercially, whether that's operationally, or whether that's from a governance perspective. Now, let's be honest, the governance side is not the sexiest side of sport. No. But certainly when working with children, arguably the most important. Now, when it comes to clubs in the community, and through your governance lens, what are some of the things that most often
go wrong or fail within sports clubs from a governance perspective?
You can have a strong financial club, you can have the best systems in place, but if you don't have the right people in the right roles in sporting clubs that are enabled by sound, fit-for-purpose governance, then you can be in trouble. And I've seen sporting clubs that are incredibly wealthy ending up on the verge of bankruptcy because of very poor governance around decision making. And so having the right people in the right jobs is important. That is critical. You can have the best systems in the world, you can have all the money in the bank that you believe in, but if you don't have the right people in those roles that know what to do, how to do it, how to run businesses, and it's independently governed to make sure that they are acting on the best interests of the organisation, then it can fall foul very, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
At a national level, I saw it happen with the Australian Rugby Union, the appointment of Eddie Jones into the coach role, which was a chairman's pick, and he didn't have support of the board and or broader states, fundamentally brought the ARU to its knees, and it was bailed out by private equity. The Lions Tour has helped that come back. Cricket Australia only makes money 2 years out of 5 in a cycle, and that's when India Tour and when the Ashes Tour, and it's publicly available information, but they lost money last year with the Indian Tour. So even the biggest organisations that have strong balance sheets, it can go wrong very quickly if you don't have the right governance in place. And then you have force majeure events like COVID, that if you don't have some form of endowment in place and or additional annuity revenue, then the clubs can become scuppered very quickly. And it's driven by passion. And in community sport, more often than not, you're right, it's volunteers, it's mums and dads, it's people that are retired, and they do it through pure energy and belief and passion in the sport. And the intent, I think, 9 times out of 10 is absolutely kind of sound and for the right reasons. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in the best interest of the club. And that's a very difficult, challenging thing to unpick when a club environment has been someone's life for 20 or 30 years and they've given everything to that, but financially the club's in a precarious situation because of how it's been run. So the key to this is fit for purpose. You don't need a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but you do need some sound governance principles around how money is managed, controlled, regulated in an organisation. Working with children and making sure that the clubs are compliant and you've got the right checks and balances in place. And that actually you're thinking beyond the passion for the sport. So how can we leverage the facilities that we have to leverage that from an annuity revenue point of view to help fund some of the things we'd like to do as a club but can't necessarily afford to do. It just requires a far more strategic perspective rather than just passion. Because we've all got passion. We all love sport. That's why we're here. But fundamentally to play sport at a strong, competent level, it's got to be well financed to enable the teams to do well. And you need to take investment decisions as well. And they're not always going to give you short-term return on investment. And when you start talking about women in sport and how the funding pathways are created for women in sport, the phrase I hear more often than not is, women's sport is loss-making, it doesn't make any money. Well, if you've worked in elite men's sport, 99% of men's sport is also loss-making as well. So it's about making the correct funding decisions to support the broader community that you serve in a sporting code as well. So it's about the right people, sound, fit-for-purpose governance. If you have that, the rest of it will come in time. But you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have that piece right, then fundamentally you will fall foul.
So in your mind, and if we kind of put this in the real world of a club in the community, whether it's football, soccer, rugby, cricket, and netball, basketball, if you're looking at an avatar of person per se that you think is a good fit for a governance role within a club, what do they look like? What skills do they have?
Well, when you do company directors courses, one of the things they talk to you about is about having a skills matrix, and you map out what does that club need, or what does that committee need, or what does that board need. It's exactly the same for the sporting club. And we don't over-architect it, but you can't have a sports board that is just full of passionate cricketers, because someone needs to understand how to spend the money, what the laws are, how to market it, and everything else. So it is mapping out what are the right skills. And it is a balance between having the business skills, through to knowing how to run sports administration, through to the passion of being a sports professional as well, but also someone representing the community and someone representing the families of the children as well. So I would say in the same way as you'd map it out in a sporting governance context, the skills matrix around what you want and need is important. But like anything in life, it needs to be diverse. It can't just have a lot of white 68-year-old men who love the sport. It's not diverse, you know. And if you don't get diversity, you don't get diversity of thought, and then you get what's called groupthink. And they all follow the leader and go in the same direction as well. The other thing with sporting boards, and I've had many a challenging conversation on this, is you've got to get the balance between the sports professionals and the elite sportsmen and the high-performing sports individuals and the business people right. Because if you have a board that's full of just elite high-performance or former high-performance sports individuals, that's great, but typically they've not made their money, they've not made their career in business and how to run businesses. But you need the ear and the thought process of an elite high-performance former sport individual to help you shape what it could and should be like as well. So it's about balance, it's about equality, gender balance, and having the right skills. There's no right persona, but it does need to be diverse.
So once a club has got its governance structure in place, a diverse group of leaders, some of whom undoubtedly are very passionate and some are maybe a bit more objective in their view, to make good decisions based upon the business interests of the club, in support of the passionate people that can protect the membership and all things they need from sport. We start to kind of move through the process of all the other things within sports clubs that can add or possibly reduce value in turn. Now, aside from governance and its quite obvious critical deliverable to the members, we then talk about money, revenue, margins, and we talk about systems operationally that's going to allow these volunteers to grow and develop and scale the program with some consistency. And then we have the people at the club and the impact they have on community and culture. How do these things stack for you as far as the priorities of a club leader? How does governance sit against money, against people, and against systems?
Oh, look, revenue is vanity, cash is sanity. So how you collect cash in sports clubs is critical. And it's hard because you ask volunteers to send out emails to hundreds of email addresses saying, please pay these subscriptions I'd love to say it's once a week, it's not. The reality is there's probably club training, there's probably some food at club training in some capacity, there'd be the game day, there'd be the travel associated with the game day if it's an away game. And so it's a constant ask and flurry of emails, of WhatsApp groups and email exchanges. And how you monitor that and provide information on that is critical as well. If you don't collect that cash in, no one's going to pay the bus driver to drive the bus down to the next club match at the end of the day. And I've seen dozens of times, as I'm sure you have, that someone just put their hand in the pocket and paid it themselves because it's too hard and they get round to collecting cash. So how clubs collect cash, albeit membership fees in member-based organisations or subscription fees in clubs, it is important. I've seen so many clubs that have got into trouble because they're either not charging enough money or they're not on top of cash collection, and actually they get to a point that the bank is empty. There's nothing there. So I think having the right systems in place to collect money and membership fees and have auto renewals and auto generations of invoicing receipts is important. It saves time. No one signs up to help coach their local soccer team to spend all weekend either on the email or WhatsApp or going up and down the sideline trying to get money out of parents for these things.
Which is sadly the reality.
Which is sadly the reality of it all. And then people's spirits get dampened as to why they did it, because they didn't do it for that. They're not resenting it, but if you're doing that for 20 weeks a year in rain or shine, and maybe outside of Singapore it's more often not cold and rainy, then it's pretty bloody miserable. So I think having the right systems in place that are agile, flexible, saves time. I think it increases transparency, and it's also independence. The transparency is great because it shows everyone what's come in, what's still to be collected,
Yeah.
what you need to pay out. It takes you out of that. It's independent data. And you can have a data-based conversation rather than an emotional conversation that Johnny hasn't paid this week and Freddie's a repeat non-payer. But it also, I think, creates independence as well, because again, if you're the poor soul that's up and down that goal line trying to collect subs, people start to avoid you. You start to become the bad guy because you're having to kind of pin someone in the corner because they haven't paid 3 weeks of subs and tell them that Johnny can't play next week because they've not paid their membership fee.
Yeah.
The right systems in place takes that away. It creates independence, transparency, and saves time. And as I said, revenue is vanity, cash is sanity.
Yeah.
And if you don't get cash collection right in a club, then you're not going to last very long.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in the thousands of sports clubs that we speak to, it's the thing that I think is often missed. Cash slippage in community sports clubs is a monumental problem.
Yep.
A bigger problem than most realise because clubs haven't got a handle on their numbers.
No.
You're very lucky if you have an accountant in your membership who's willing to take on the role of treasurer and keep the books neat and tidy. You're very lucky. I'd say it's 1 in 50 clubs that we speak to, maybe. Some of them have accountants, not all of them are willing to take on the job, and I understand why. But when clubs don't understand how much money is leaking and what that represents proportionately to the program, there are real problems, because you can't make good decisions if you don't understand where the money's going. You can't know how much to spend.
Inventory as well. The amount of clubs I've seen who order phenomenal amount of inventory for logo T-shirts and hats and everything else, and it sits at the back of a bloody cupboard and is unsold because there's no data there to say what did they sell last year, who bought it, how much do they make, and so they have hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of unsold inventory that's last season's and they can't sell now, and then you see them on club days just piling it all out and won't take any money for it, and they're probably losing money on that inventory as well. So it's small pieces of data like that to say, okay, every season on average we sell 25 caps and we sell 90 T-shirts at this price point, because then you can have a conversation and say, well, if we're selling those T-shirts at that price point, if we would put it up to $95, what difference does that make for the club? And it all adds up, but it's a data-based conversation and it's factual.
And that's the downside, is leaking clothing and leaking cash that's not managed particularly well, and it leaves inventory in the back of the clubhouse untouched. But there's an upside that's being missed as well, which is, well, this particular item of this 10 product range is selling phenomenally amongst our membership. What other items could we buy which are similar in stature to this one that could also be a value add to our members? And then we're creating new revenue streams and a better club experience for its people, but without the data and the tracking, these opportunities are missed.
And are we selling it to the right price point as well? Because if it's going out the door that quickly, it's probably too cheap.
Could be too cheap.
So, and it's those kind of adding up those dollars to work out. It's like the key for any club is, every club is slightly different and nuanced. What is working for your club? Is it the fact that your club, the hoodies go out the door, and also if you do a kind of sausage sizzle every kind of Saturday morning, then actually that's the big winner. So you can focus your time and money rather than having something else to look at how you do revenue generation. Very rarely do clubs look at what makes them money and what doesn't make them money. And in many instances, I see clubs driven by either legacy and history as to why they do things, but not understanding the why, or ego sometimes as to why they do it. And I see that in all sports, where they have unsustainable financial commitments that they've done for years. It loses their money because no one wants to say, hey, this is hemorrhaging us money. Do we really want to lose, or could we take that 50 grand and put it into a grassroots program for females coming into sport, or disabled kids, or whatever else it is that the best use of our funds? And because they don't track the data, they don't know, and even those that do know probably don't want to discuss it, because fundamentally it's not going to be a popular decision. But if you have the right systems in place, you can track it. It's independent, it's impartial, it's data, and you can make informed decisions on what's right and what's wrong for your club.
Absolutely. So we have governance here, and then we have all the fiscal obligations and decisions here. And I suppose that leaves predominantly people. We had a discussion last month with David Jones, the general manager here at the Singapore Cricket Club. And I asked him, how important is community at a sports club? And without a moment of hesitation, he said it was the most important thing.
I agree.
And I agreed. And the basic premise was that everything really flows downstream from a very positive community environment. People spend more time at the club, and they spend more money at the club because they have more trust in the club and its people. And economically, this floats the club to a better extent.
Now, this August, PLAI goes live, the sports club management platform that saves your volunteers hours every week. It maximizes your club revenue, and it's completely subscription free. No contract, no commitment, forever. We're releasing early access to the waitlist first before the rest of the world. Join the waitlist now. Links in your show notes.
So if I'm a club administrator looking to structure my program this year on a limited amount of time and resource, where do I invest my time first? Kelly, do I look at the governance? Do I look at how we can generate more revenue or increase margins or reduce slippage? Or do I look at community and culture and try and fix the problems there? Because if I'm a volunteer with maybe 10 hours a week for my sports club, that's a lot of work and it's going to take some time. Where would you go first?
Well, do you know, these things don't need to take time or an excessive amount of time. So I think the first thing, I mean, the challenge with member-based organisations is every member will have a different opinion, and I can assure you they will not be afraid to share it with you. Because if they're doing a member-based subscription fee or an affiliation fee, it's their rite of passage to tell you what, you know, more often than not, what's going wrong rather than what's going right.
Yeah.
So I would start off with doing a survey to the community group, you know, and you can get free, you know, products online, SurveyMonkey, you know, that are free of charge to go out and ask the members, ask the communities, all the people within your community club, what's important to them, what's working, what's not working, what don't they like, you know, if they were you for a day, what are the 3 things they would change? And then with transparency, go back to them and share the results to them.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing when you do these surveys is most people get cynical because they never see change from the survey.
Yes.
And I'd say in not just in clubs, but in life in general, don't overcommit. So pick the 2 or 3 things that you think you can do this season to make a difference. But also tell them why. And it can't just be because they've shouted the loudest. You know, when I was on the golf board, the amount of people that used to come to me and tell me that they were selling Swanee Draft at the club rooms, and they weren't happy with that. They wanted something else. You know, that's great, but it's not going to change my sport, but it was important to them. So you can pass it back to the bar and say, hey, maybe here's some feedback, maybe you increase bar sales. But, you know, that's the type of thing I was told on a frequent basis, was more around, you know, beer sales, frankly. But go back and tell them why. Here's the 3 things we're going to focus on, and this is the reasons why. Yeah. So that survey doesn't take long to do, doesn't take long to get the results back, and doesn't take long to communicate back. So first off, you're listening to your community, you're listening to your members, and you're looking at what will make a difference to them. In terms of governance, don't get me wrong, you know, we're talking basic governance. So how do we keep a check on, you know, what is our strategy for the year? And I'm not saying bring in McKinsey, but I am saying, you know, what are the things we want to get right this year? And what are the things that probably are going to be a poor cousin to that? And we're going to make a plan. So we don't need to over-architect it, but we need to get to a place that we have collective agreement and disagreement, but largely collective agreement around what is the strategy this year, or our strategic pillars, or our priorities. And that could be as simple as we will do 1 club tournament this year. We're going to upgrade the changing room facilities, and we're going to, you know, look at increasing our revenue by X or Y. So it's the basics of collectively agreeing on a strategy and governing that strategy by a committee to get the outcome to that club. Yeah. And a component part of that has to be always about how we're improving the club, how we're improving the seat. So the next person that comes into this seat, you know, picks it up and takes it on to being a better place. And if you do that, that will impact the outcome the members feel, the sport environment feels. Yeah. But fundamentally, if you don't have the money to do it, you can only ever cut your cloth and cut your cake, you know, accordingly. Yeah. So I'd encourage every club to take a real deep, hard look at their finances and ask themselves some really difficult questions. Yeah. I mean, most money is wasted in clubland, other than leakage from non-payment of fees. Yep. Most money is lost in clubland because they'll have unsustainable tournaments, is where it tends to go. So I see in golf, They run a lot of pennants competitions, they lose money.
Yeah.
If I look at the open competitions all around Australia, they all lose money. And if you look at the money they lose, and say we were to take that back and put it into a youth development program to bring the next generation of golfer through or the next generation of cricketer through, then actually which one would we prefer to do? Yeah. Lose money on a pennants competition or an open competition that loses us between 2 and 500 million, so 200,000 and 500,000 a year, or take that into youth development. And invest it in the right way for the next generation.
Yeah.
But also, how do you then say, well, how do we create an endowment so that we've got money there in the background, so if we need to invest in our systems or the clubhouse, or that we're not constantly going out to the members, that we're making our money work for itself, which may be boring, but trust me, setting up a small endowment through a surplus that is generated every year, it all adds up if it's invested correctly. Yeah. And it means rather than going out to the members saying we need new sports jerseys or the facilities that showers need upgrading, and then you've got money in the endowment that's working for you, you can invest as well. So it's not an either or, but what's important is to listen to the members, and just be honest with them and transparent, or as transparent as you reasonably can be to them. Yeah. But if you're not going to do that tournament this year, here's why. It's losing us 500k per year, and therefore we want to invest that money in X, Y, and Z. And if people feel really passionate about that, they get on board the bus to find a way that tournament will make money through sponsorship or fees or whatever else it is. But if it's not, it's about having those hard conversations. So I don't want governance to be seen as a boring legal requirement. It's being fit for purpose, and it's to govern what you collectively agree as a strategy to give the outcomes to the members and the communities you serve. Yeah. And so that's what governance is there for. Ultimately, it's to deliver to those communities, to your members, and to the kids on the pitch on the day as well.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about ROI, return on investment, I think instinctively people's minds will go to the fiscal side. How can we increase margins, reduce slippage, reduce burn or cost, and maximize revenue? It's a very small part of the puzzle. I think an ROI in clubland, in grassroots sport, comes in a few different formats. But through your perspective, if we move away from that thought that a lot of clubs have, which is that ROI is pegged against cash alone, what do you think is the most underrated form of return that great systems and great operations can unlock within a sports club?
It's an interesting one. Probably the biggest intangible benefit, actually, of having a great club is creating strong communities. It's around supporting resilience and mental health in kids and giving them confidence to grow up. It creates an environment that, if you look at the statistics around crime and kids in sport, if a kid is engaged in a sporting pursuit within a club, they are less likely to offend and end up with a criminal conviction. Correct. Because of the culture that fosters values and behaviour and acceptable conduct, and it gives them purpose. Yeah. And so I think one of the most underrated ROIs is around how we're raising our future generations of kids. Yeah. The impact that has in building resilience, especially in a day where getting kids off tablets and actually outside in the fresh air is pretty bloody hard. So it's giving them purpose, it gives them confidence, it gives them a tribe to feel safe within, physically together, rather than on a screen talking to them. And I think it really helps with mental health, and I think it helps also with mental health of adults as well, that actually at various points in our life we all struggle. And you wouldn't be normal if you didn't. Every point in our life we all struggle in some way, shape or form. And actually what sports do and clubs do is provide support from a mental health purpose and a sense of belonging. At a point at times in our life that maybe we struggle to work out what that is, that sense of belonging I think is important. And I think a really good example of that is with New Zealand rugby. The reason I personally think, and I say this being married to a Kiwi, that New Zealand rugby is so strong is every single rugby club is embedded in the community. You go to these smallest of towns in New Zealand, and they'll have a clubhouse. And that clubhouse is usually doubles up as a local bar and the local gym. It's the heart of the community.
Yeah.
It's where the weddings happen. It's where the funerals happen. It's where the birthdays happen. It's where the game on Saturday happens. And it's, you know, it's a community.
Yeah.
And so the reason they get generation after generation of successful player is the clubs are embedded at the heart of everything those communities do.
Yeah.
And it creates a bond that is just, you know, unsurpassable for any other sport.
Yeah.
So the ROI for me is it does create community, purpose, and a sense of belonging. It gives hope to the future of our kids to get them outside to improve health and wellness. And I think there's a, you know, very tangible link to mental health in adults as well.
I think a lot of people that find themselves in leadership positions at sports clubs possibly haven't had the time or bandwidth or exposure to some of these discussions. There's an incredible book by Johann Hari called Lost Connections. It speaks about all of this, how we were tribal beings who have evolved very quickly and fundamentally lost our sense of tribe and purpose. And I can't think of too many other things than sport, possibly food, possibly music, that brings people together and crosses boundaries, it crosses borders, it crosses language, it crosses race, gender, sexual orientation. None of it matters in sport.
No.
We're all there together celebrating and contributing towards a shared passion.
Correct.
And what that does for people's identity and their feeling of belonging within a community, I think, is critical. But when volunteer parents are thrusted into roles of leadership, they've not really had exposure to just how important the role of the club is to its community. And that's fundamentally what I hope we're going to achieve through these range of discussions, is if we can reach clubs in a new way, with new discussions and new focus and new ideas and new perspective, maybe we can help some clubs think differently about the next stage. Because I certainly think some of the legacy frameworks of community clubs must be challenged. And I think it's overdue.
Yeah, and I had this conversation recently with someone, is that sports administration has fundamentally changed. The successful sports administrators from 20 years ago, if they use that mentality and methodology, will not be successful in today's world. But a lot of sporting, or certainly elite sports clubs, are still governed by people from that generation. And I certainly saw that in golf. You know, you have golf clubs that are just dying breeds, absolutely dying. Why? Because it's a lot of kind of, you know, white 85-year-old men who've got their own parking space, their own seat at the bar. You know, they pay their membership and they rule the roost, and it's their rules and their way of doing it. The clubs are going broke because it's not attracting a younger generation through. It's not attracting individuals that are curious about new formats of the code or the sport. And I think what you have to do is acknowledge that fundamentally the new formats that are evolving through sport now, so it could be T20, it could be live golf, it could be you know, rugby sevens has been around for, you know, a pretty long period of time. It could be R360 and NRL, are faster forms of the sport, which does attract a new and younger generation who want that instantaneous result. I mean, I love Test cricket, and I can't wait to be sat on the sofa for, well, let's hope it's more than 2 days, but you know, 4 days of Test cricket. But I'm nearly 50, so fundamentally there's a generation out there that want a short, sharp, 20 overs game, and it appeals to them. But unless sports administration evolves and the way in which we build and lead and sustain clubs evolves, then the generation of sports administrator from, you know, 10, 20 years ago, they are dinosaurs. But a lot of them are still running high performance sport and sports codes, but they won't evolve because it challenges what they love about the sport. But they're not looking with perspective to say, well, is this club serving all our members, and is it sustainable for the future? What are we doing today, and is it sustainable for the future? They're doing what worked 20 or 30 years ago, and the world's changed.
And to your point earlier, I definitely think there's an argument to say there's a role for that person. And that role is to remind us of the history of the club and ensure we're across the journey the club has travelled, and to continue to invest passion at this level of leadership within everything the light touches within this club. But it quite possibly ends there, because they're not going to be across modern systems and tooling and technologies. They're not going to be across the problems of today, which are very different to the problems of 20 years ago.
Absolutely. The biggest change that I think has changed sport, and speaking from someone who works very close to some of the elite sports levels, I can tell you now that most of the governing bodies are struggling with is the way in which people consume sport now. So if you look 5 years ago, not even 10 years ago, then fundamentally it would have been on Foxtel or Sky Sport, and it would have been reading the back page of a newspaper. Maybe a bit on Google, but even then the maturity of the websites and how national sporting providers provided content was quite limited.
Yeah.
And they were still playing with pay gating of content. So, you know, but if I look at streaming services now and the way in which you consume sport, even club sport, because a parent can sit there with a camera and live stream sport, and I see that in rugby all the time, especially in New Zealand rugby, and increasingly also in Australian rugby, where they will have 2 or 3 parents live streaming club games, and there are channels they can promote that information. So how we consume sport now is completely different. But what we haven't done is evolve how we monetize the consumption of sport. Because previously it was done through broadcast deals, which was fed down to grassroots sport. So if you look at AFL in Australia, there was a national deal done with Foxtel, and that money was fed down to grassroots sport through that national deal. They'll never get a deal that size again now, because that sport can be streamed and consumed in very different ways. And the premium was charged because the consumption was from one medium that would take all of the participants in that one medium, and that's changed. And that's what's going to be really interesting around the commercial models of sport now, because it's not what it used to be, which would be, you know, paper journalism or pretty much one form of digital content.
I'm aligned, and we had a catch up, didn't we, at the club that we share a few weeks ago, about whether revenue in grassroots sport is today fundamentally top down or bottom up. I think the consensus that we came to is it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, historically I'd say it was more top down. I think if the club could maybe just generate enough revenue within the community to kind of keep ticking along, there was enough money flowing downstream from the bigger picture into the clubs to be able to do some of the more exciting stuff. But these days, if a club can't generate its own margin and its own balance and its own kind of sustainability for the future, it will not survive, because that money is not flowing downstream from the top anymore. Is that a fair observation? Do clubs need to be doing more to protect their future, as opposed to waiting for the big sponsor or the big grant or the big whatever it might be of yesterday?
So yes, they do, but I think in the past, and I think COVID fundamentally changed this, is that there would be a variety of different revenue streams from the national governing body that would distribute some form of surplus to the clubs in some capacity through usually a national. It could be the AO tennis, or it could be maybe not the Australian Open golf, but with AFL, broadcast rights still would get distributed down to grassroots, and they allocate a percentage of that would go every year to grassroots sports. So I think there is that business model still, but what COVID showed was every man unto themselves, and that actually, rather than looking at a federated model, the states then were then saying, well, how do we protect it in our county, it could be in Hampshire, or it could be in the state of Western Australia, because we can't rely on other people. And so what they did was became quite protectionist around revenue distribution, whereas in the past they'd say, oh, we'd have a high profile tournament here, we've sponsored that, and that's our contribution, whereas now they're saying, no, the clubs are all voters in our electorate, we want to make sure that they get the club facilities or something else. So I think there's a multi-revenue stream here from national governing body, from federal and state government distribution of funding, which fluctuates depending on government and government of the day, and that doesn't matter if it's in the UK, France or Australia. It's a federated model there. I think there is club membership numbers and revenue, there's tournament and there's sponsorship, and I think all of them are valid revenue generation aspects. In the past, I think a lot of reliance came from local community funding from the local council, and probably the national governing body, and I think now that's changed as a consequence of COVID, because a lot of clubs did go under and or had very challenging periods of time, and so that what they've now had to do is say, well, where else can we get our money from? What are the assets that we own? Is it a clubhouse that we own? I mean, Singapore Cricket Club's a good example of this with the Formula One every year. They do lease out aspects of the greenery and the grasslands here for the event, and it generates a very good income that probably sustains membership at a certain level. So clubs nowadays are looking at multiple different ways of leveraging assets if they own them, and or moving beyond it just being handouts from state and county councils and local government. So it's multiple revenue streams that take place.
This August, PLAI launches, the sports club management app that consolidates everything that your club needs into one place. It's registrations, payments, comms, team selection, and more. It's subscription free, no contract, no commitment. Now, waitlist members get it first before anybody else in the world. Join the waitlist now, and the link is in your show notes.
And I do think we're going through a bit of a cultural transition. I mean, problems inherently are the catalyst to creative thinking, to deliver solutions. And when some of these clubs are going through this process, many of them for the first time in a long time of, okay, we have a really significant problem here. It could be community and culture, it could be fiscal and monetary, but we have a problem here, and for the first time in a while, we've got to think really creatively to establish a solution. And if they get out the end of that process in a positive way, it does start to lay this framework of, okay, we can think a bit more creative about the problems we have within our club ecosystem, and it's going to serve us positively, because I do think there is still this perception within sports clubs, certainly in the UK where I was brought up, this whole kind of change is not good kind of perspective. But the bottom line is that the clubs that are standing still are the ones who are dying a death. It's the clubs that are mobilizing and developing in a really positive way. As far as growth is concerned, growth can be one of 5 or 6 different critical pillars, but those that are developing and evolving are the ones that are thriving. Those that are standing still are the ones that are struggling. Would you agree?
It's interesting because we use the word club as this amorphous subject matter. I mean, fundamentally, a club is just a building, you know? So when it comes down to that, it will be 9 times out of 10, it will be 2 or 3 really strong personalities in the ecosystem. That are either matriarchal or patriarchal, have been there for a long time, and no one wants to go and have the conversation with them that that's just not how we play golf anymore, that's not how we play cricket anymore, and the world's moved on. And we're all too busy in our day jobs, so we just kind of leave them to it, and you just then, I suppose, self-opt out of those club environments. So when you really diagnose cultural problems within the club, which is an amorphous, it will come down to a number of personalities, and it won't be as many as you think. Now, they may have a followership, and I've seen this particularly actually in cricket in Australia. You'll see some former players from 20 or 30 years ago that were, wearing baggy green 20 or 30 years ago, strong personas, and they create this kind of cult superstar followership. And their reflection on the game was where the game was when they were still playing 30 years ago. And they don't look at balance sheets. They definitely don't want women in their clubhouse. That's just, that's horrific. You know, they have a thought process as to how it could and should be and should always be. So when we talk about, clubs, when clubs have problems and you really get underneath it, it will be 2 or 3 strong personalities. And a bunch of people who just either don't care enough, don't want to get involved, too political, it's a local community so they don't want to fall out, and just leave them to it. And that creates the death spiral, of a club. And I've seen it in golf clubs that are dying all over the country. Golf has never been more popular. If you look at the underlying data from golf, and go and look at Golf Australia's website, and there's many others as well, PGA will be the same, the growth of golf has been phenomenal. I couldn't tell you what the numbers off the top of my head. It's phenomenal since COVID. But if you look at the decline of golf clubs, it's falling through the floor.
And that data is consistent pretty much across the entire sporting ecosystem. Participation is going up, volume of clubs is coming down. This means the big clubs are getting bigger, because these small clubs over here are folding, and these people still have an appetite for sport, and they're going to another club. And number of clubs is reduced, bigger clubs are getting bigger. But who's out there helping the small clubs that are still so critical?
Different formats. If I look at golf, people now aren't signing up so much because they don't want to sign up to just playing to a lot of money to play at one golf club for the rest of their life. They want to be able to go to dozens of golf clubs. They want to go to different driving ranges. They want to go to these long drive kind of competition ranges. They want to go on holiday for golfing holidays. So they don't want to be spending 5, 10, 20,000 a year to be a member of a golf club that they play in one club for all their time. They want variety. And they also look at different golfing formats as well. They want to go to live golf. They want to go to pitch and putt. And I remember looking for something, and we were looking at succession planning, and we were looking at, you know, who could potentially move into some of these roles moving forward. And I interviewed a guy, and he said, oh, look, you know, if you're not playing 18 holes, then it's not golf. And that's just genuine belief. And this was for a chairman role of something. And you kind of go, geez, that's so the opposite of our, short-sighted, and the opposite of what our strategy was, because now all golf is golf.
If you haven't got 5 hours, you can't play golf.
Well, 8 hours the way I play golf, you know, kind of like, you know, 8 hours, you know, and who cares? Just get them on. I don't care if they go down a driving range for half an hour and hit 100 balls, you know. So I think, yes, the bigger clubs are getting bigger and more powerful and have more say, and they've got much stronger balance sheets, and so they have more sway, especially the national bodies who, if you look at their balance sheets, you know, they're not as strong as you think they are, you know. There's 2 or 3 sports that are really up there, and you know, they would be cricket, and in Australia it'd be AFL, cricket and NRL. In England it would be EPL, it would be soccer, it would be cricket, and probably rugby union. So different countries, it's slightly different things. But beyond that, actually, all other formats and balance sheets, they are skinny, very, very skinny, and borderline unviable if you were to take government funding out of those formats as well.
Sure. And when you drill down into one sport specifically, you know, cricket is essentially governed by the big 3, right? You've got the BCCI that run the show out of India, and then you've got the ECB and Cricket Australia. They're kind of really seen to be the decision makers in cricket. I think most people follow them, but I think certainly with 2-day test matches, which certainly won't help Cricket Australia's balance sheet.
No.
But fiscally, some of those associations are probably not as strong as they think we are, as you say, but it's definitely not a sport situation, because certainly in Hong Kong, where I played my international cricket, it was very evident that our balance sheet at times was not in the best of health. And that was how players were supported, and what expenses were and weren't covered, and what tier of flight we were on, and what time of flight we were on, and how many connections we had. And it's very clear that pennies were being stretched. So as much as you have sports like cricket, which on a global scale are perceived to be quite strong, well, actually, it's really, I'd say, probably 2 or 3 associations running the whole show. Do you agree?
If that, I'd say right now, in the current governance construct, there's one association running that particular sport, but that was due to a governance failing many years ago, and they're struggling to wrestle it back now to be more equitable, which is why we're seeing franchise sport crop up all around the world for cricket to give other people options, and rightly so. I don't think that domination will be challenged anytime soon by arguably the size of their franchise sport in their country is so dominant, and other fixtures frankly nowadays are revolving around that and that alone. But you know, that's an example of when governance goes wrong, how one country can dominate a sport because they do control fixtures, funding, and also where key talent in those sporting hubs go to as well.
So coming back to the ROI of great club management, we've spoke about governance and what good governance looks like, the avatar or the persona of operator that should be involved within those discussions. And we spoke about the importance of finances, reducing cash slippage, maximising revenue, ensuring that margins are ever present. When the club has gone through the process of simplifying and reducing and aligning and optimising some of these things, what happens to the day-to-day experience of volunteers and members within a club?
I think it goes to the roof. I think they feel more valued because there's more transparency on what they contribute, which I think is incredibly important. I think that how participation is spread across the cohort, you know, benefits from that as well. The member experience, the person that's every Saturday on the touchline collecting fees, they're not doing that anymore. They're now actually kind of, you know, coaching or refereeing or you know, in the tuck shop or whatever else it is, and so their experience of the whole you know, kit and caboodle is a lot more positive all round, and it reduces conflict in that club system. And I do think many of these clubs are heavily weighted on half a dozen, no more, volunteers that give everything, and you know, and just invaluable. The challenge is there's huge key man risk around that, and at some point in time they can't give all and they go, and then there's fragility in the club. So I think when you have the right systems and processes in place and the right tools, and again, you know, we're talking about, we're not looking at putting SAP into these clubs for goodness sake, but we are saying there are flexible, agile, cloud-based solutions that enable clubs to do this that are very cost effective. It means that the people in the club can do what they love to do most, which is to barrack for the sport, for their kids and the community, and the whole community benefits as a consequence of that.
Yeah.
And you can focus on the right things.
So when you step back and look at a really well-run sports club, what are the core things that you know are happening that other people don't see? It's invisible to the members and invisible to the masses, but you're a sports club operator. There's a handful of systems behind the scenes running everything. If you were building a sports club today, what would that look like? What are those systems?
Look, it is about having that clear vision for the club. What does success look like? And it's relatively unified. I mean, are you going to get every person in that club to agree that you're only going to do the short format of the game, or, you know, only play every second weekend at home? No, but is there a strategy? I hate to use the word strategy because it sounds really over-architected, but is there a core purpose everyone can get behind? In terms of the structure of the club, you know, are there multiple people that you can call upon? So you've got, you know, presidents, you've got people who have facilities. You know, is there a whole diversity there of, in effect, club leaders that come in together? In terms of how you go about it, what do you do, how do you do it, that's often led by the systems. What are you going to focus on as well? So just getting the basics in place around cash management, banking, to make sure you know what's coming in, what's going out, where your challenges are. The good clubs are really honest with themselves around what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, and where do they make money and where aren't they going to make money, and actually how are they going to invest in areas as well. They leverage their assets, so it's not just about cash collection from the parents. You've got to find other ways. It could be local sponsorship, it could be government, it could be leveraging, you know, the sports rooms and facilities for a Christmas party or something, anything that generates revenue that comes in as well. And they constantly look at and say, well, you know, are we doing the right thing aligned to our purpose? It isn't about one or two strong personalities. You know, is the collective purpose being served here? And they're honest and critical of themselves to look at how they improve, and they embrace innovation around different formats of the game as well. So it's not stayed. You know, the clubs that die, the ones that are still only doing 18 holes of golf, that's it. No one else is welcome, or only play Test cricket. And if you don't want to do that, then you're not a cricketer. That's just rubbish. You know, what's right for your community that you're serving in. So. But it will come back to having the right people in the right roles, and being really clear in your cash management, and doing it in a way that you have the data to make the right informed decisions. And you know, you're not Chelsea Football Club as well. You're not Liverpool Football Club.
Own your space.
You know, own your level, own your space with pride. You know, own it with pride.
I think it's brilliant. And the one thing that we are seeing in the data is that committees are getting younger. I think it's a really positive thing, and you know, that's not to the detriment of the legacy historian of the club that's been there for 20 years. And we discussed earlier, there's always a role for that person, no doubt. But committees are getting younger, and I think that will lead in due course to a fairly significant shift in how clubs are run. But naturally, when you do lose that elder statesman who has been in a kind of ranking position of the club for many, many years, regardless of the positive or other impact that said person was maybe having on the program, it's disruptive. So what would you say clubs can do through that transition to protect its momentum when moving to a new leadership group? We've lost this resource that we've had for decades. We're moving to a young, growth-driven committee. What can clubs do during that transition to protect downside?
It's mapping your talent. I mean, firstly, ask your community who wants to serve, who wants to step up, you know, because most people don't do it because they haven't been asked, or they didn't know there was an opportunity, so they didn't put their hand up first. So map your talent, understand who's where and who would be interested, understand the skills they bring, make sure it's a diverse environment. You know, there's a lot to be said about having a patriarch or matriarch involved to keep us all honest about what we're here for, and to respect some of those values that made the institution something we love, and there's a lot to be said about protecting that, but not protecting it at all costs as well. So I come back to around having a diverse environment. You know, some of the best clubs I know have a female matriarch who's the person that cleans the boot rooms, washes all the kits, runs the tuck shop, and is the person that collects all the subs. You know, without that person, the club wouldn't exist. And there's probably a noisy chairman that sat at the bar drinking beers as well. So, you know, there's no right or wrong with either of those, but map your talent, be inclusive. Don't allow one strong personality to overrule others, and that's where most clubs go wrong. You have a very, very, very dogmatic, strong, at times aggressive persona of one or two individuals, and people just can't be asked.
Yeah.
In all honesty, they want to serve, but they can't be asked. So there's talent everywhere if you choose to look up and see that talent and just ask the question.
And it really reinforces the point about surveying your membership, listening to their needs. One thing that we did brilliantly when we were running this program is within one of our surveys, and we would do them every year. And I think there's an argument to say you should be doing micro surveys maybe every quarter on different pillars and subject matters relative to the club: clothing, equipment, tours, training, matches, whatever it may be. But in our surveys, we made a real effort to get to understand our parents. What's your professional background? How long have you been doing that?
Yeah.
And what does your week look like? Are you a remote worker? Are you an office worker? Are you a hybrid worker? If so, which days are you in the office? And what do your work hours look like? Now, they were all optional questions. We're not going to mandate this information from anybody, but if they're willing to share it with us, we can pull together some really strong matchups in terms of this parent has these professional skills, and we have a blind spot in this part of our community club program that this person matches up beautifully to. Can we engage them for a discussion of giving back?
We had a challenge. We just weren't selling any sporting gear, basically, for kids. And
who was this with?
I won't say because it would be because it's a high performance environment, and it's part of the whole Olympics cycle as well. And they just we just couldn't we couldn't give it to the players. If we gave it to the players, they didn't wear it, and we couldn't sell the gear either. And it came down to us doing a survey to work out that it was so bloody itchy, and actually in the particular sport they couldn't actually execute their swing in the sport because of the way in which the clothing had been constructed, because the clothing was actually more for running rather than actually the particular sport it was in. And so they weren't wearing it because it was either too thick, too itchy, or they couldn't actually execute part of their sporting performance cycle because of it. And we only found it out because no one told us. We only found it out because we did a survey and actually people put it on there. And then all of a sudden we were like, okay, and we changed the sport brand. We were given the sport brand, told it's the brand we were using for this particular cycle. It's fine. But then, it wasn't designed with that sport in mind, and it just was, so it was only when we asked them they told us. Anyhow, we changed the sports brand and the clothing that was more fit for purpose for the sport, and the numbers rocketed up, and we made over $1 million profit in that particular area. But if you don't speak to people, people will find their own solution. And this is a small example, but when I play golf, it's not a quick process, and it doesn't need to be.
I'm right there with you.
I'm not there to qualify for anything. It's quite meditative, but I do like to take a coffee with me on when I go out and play around. And if you look at my golf trolley, it's just full of mucky coffee that's stained everywhere. Anyhow, I was a member of a very high profile club, and it cost a fortune, which is fine. But they didn't serve coffee. Never served coffee. And if you want upstairs, you can go upstairs to the club room and have a cup of coffee, but you could never take a coffee out on your round. And it's so small, but I stopped playing golf there, and I went to a local public course instead, where if you wanted to, you could have a bloody burger. Now, I wasn't going to have a burger on my round, but they had coffee, they had sports drinks, they had all sorts of sandwiches you could take out with you in your round, and it was fine. And it was so small. It was the fact that, I don't care what the club wants to do. It's not about you, it's about your members, and we're paying tens of thousands of dollars a year, and I can't take a coffee out on my round of golf with me. So, you don't stop playing the sport, you make a choice and you go elsewhere to play your sport. Now, I went to a community facility and stopped being a member of a golf club because I just thought there's no point. I'm not paying that amount of money to have a round of golf on a beautiful golf course, but
with no coffee.
But no coffee.
It's a value exchange.
But if they'd sold it, they'd make money for the club. Do you see
Retained your membership.
Retain the membership. But it was that small question of they knew it, they just didn't want to change. So that's fine. But then you're not the right club for me. And so people vote with their feet. I don't think they stop the sport. They just go somewhere else that caters for their needs as well. So if you don't ask, you're just going to lose membership as a consequence of not knowing. Or if you do lose your membership, at least you're doing it on the basis of an informed choice to lose that membership. Because you know why.
I couldn't agree more. So a club leader is watching this and they're going away thinking about all manner of ways that they can improve their club this year. Let's align on the first few things they should maybe do. Number one, have a peek over leadership and maybe assess some new people for new roles that maybe create a fantastic matchup for the best interests of everybody.
Rotate them. Don't just have the same person that runs the bar or the tuck shop or does the kit or does the
Get them in different
list.
roles. Where
Give
do
them
they
different
excel?
roles. Rotate them.
And obviously that's all got to start with the feedback, and maybe that's the first part actually that a club admin can do, is get a survey together. I think the mistake people will make is go to put together a 15-page survey. It doesn't need to be that. Less than 2 minutes to complete, maybe 10 to 12 questions.
And be courageous. Ask the questions that you really don't want to hear the answer to, but you need to hear the answer to. Because honestly, it's better to hear it and know it than not. And don't assume that you know what your members think.
And let's be honest, the people that are not ready to change or grow are probably not listening or watching to this anyway.
No.
Those that are watching have got a legitimate interest in growing and developing their clubs, and I think they'll be creative people. So we put together a survey, and it's maybe 10 questions, and I'd really encourage club leaders to focus on one sort of deep and narrow within these 10 questions. It might be clothing and merchandise. Just make all 10 questions about that. We can do another survey 3 months from now on something else. But the second that we go across the entire club program in one survey, the survey gets long, people don't complete it, and then it's surplus to requirements. So I'm a club leader today. The first thing I can do is survey my members. Get some feedback and some communication on one part of the club that you feel and they feel could be improved quite quickly. Once you have that feedback, we know where to look, we know where to spend. Then we're looking at governance. And the next cycle of governance and how we're going to make sure we get the right people in the right roles.
Light touch governance.
Like what?
Light touch governance, but no sledgehammer to crack a nut. You don't need to be doing whole company directors boards and enough to understand what do our members want, what is our purpose as a club and ambition, and how are we going to govern it to make sure that we can get there in a reasonable time frame. So don't over-architect governance, but have enough there to keep the kids safe, the families safe, the funding safe, and also help unify purpose. Because you'll have those strong personalities that want to go that way, and your members want to go that way, and the governance helps to unify that and keep it under within the club.
And then we're really looking at money and people. I'm starting with the people, which is, through my lens, the most important thing. Community and culture within a sports club, through my lens, it starts with kindness. And I was speaking to David Jones about this earlier. I had an experience recently where I joined a sports club under membership, and I played a reasonable standard of cricket, and I thought I could add a lot of value to the club as a player, working with the youngsters in the facility when we trained, and supporting the club operationally grow and develop as well. But when I brought my wife to this club, she felt fundamentally unwelcome. And I only realized now that actually that was all I needed. That was all I needed to know. Because in a club that isn't kind to the people that I care about, well, that's a club that actually doesn't care about me very much.
It's not your tribe.
It's not my tribe.
Very quick example, and I'd say golf because golf's a passion of mine. I was a member of this private members golf club. My husband's a very down-to-earth Kiwi. He doesn't believe in private members anything. It's just not him. And we went out to play a round of golf. And we went to the golf shop to pick up some balls and bits and pieces. And my husband had a pair of socks on, and they were white socks with a Kiwi All Black fern on. And he was told he couldn't play golf wearing those socks. So out of respect, he bought a pair of socks from the club so he could go out and play a round of golf. And I could see he was festering. And then we were in the car afterwards, and he said to me, I'll never play golf in that club ever again. And if I can't get my husband to that golf club, there's no place there for me. They're not my tribe. Because they're not his tribe, they're not my tribe.
100%.
And they lost my membership over a pair of socks. And I can't tell you how much money this club costs every year. It's a fortune. But I don't want to be amongst that, you know? So I hear you. It's about making not just you welcome, but your family welcome. If you're not happy, if your wife's not content, you're not happy, it
makes it so much harder for me to invest my time in that club when the club hasn't been kind to my tribe, like you say.
Absolutely.
So I really hope at the end of this series that clubs have streamlined operations, made things simpler and reduced down the complexity to create time that they can either spend with their families or on growing the club through its next stage. Or just thinking big picture and building a strategy and a plan and a roadmap as to what the club is going to try and achieve over the next 4 years, which so few clubs have.
Understand where you make money.
Know where you make. Know your numbers.
Know your numbers. Where are you making money? Where are you losing money? And if you still want to carry on losing money in that area, that's fine, but you make an informed decision. collectively that you're investing in that area.
Yeah.
So know where you make your money, and wherever you're making it well, do more of it.
Yeah.
Wherever you are losing money, have the hard conversations with yourself and your members about, is this something we think is absolutely incrementally important to the future of the club?
Yeah.
And if it is, it's an investment decision, but revisit it every year and look how you minimize the money you're losing from that particular area, or can make it profitable over time.
Yeah.
So know your numbers.
Yeah. And once you've got the systems to support all of that, and the operational load is reduced, and all of this time has opened up, but then you have the bandwidth just to focus on
Enjoying it. Enjoy the sport.
enjoying the sport
Which is what we're all there for.
and being kind to people on the journey,
There
which
you go.
sadly in today's world is something that we maybe can't expect anymore. But these people are under a lot of pressure in community sport. How can we reduce the pressure and ensure focus stays where focus needs to be? Sport and people.
But enjoyment comes from celebrating the moments that matter.
Correct.
And that could be, you know, the 5-year-old that scores a goal at the wrong end of the pitch, or it could be just, you know, the cup of coffee in the freezing cold day and the sausage sizzle,
Yeah.
and it could just be seeing your mate who's had a bit of a, you know, bad week, and seeing a smiling face has made a difference to them. So
Yeah.
kindness means many things to many people, and sometimes the simple act of kindness is saying, are you okay?
Yeah.
That's all people need sometimes.
Yeah.
And sport and community sport provides that.
Yeah. Kelly, thank you so much. This has been fun, and I always get nervous when I sit down with you because I feel like we could speak for a very long period
We
of
do.
time, and in fact we have
Yeah.
on many occasions. But before we finish, I'll share the story of how we bumped into each other, because we are both a member of a local club here in Singapore, and it's not a sports club, it's more of a working social club, isn't it? And I was sat there on my big high table doing my work. I think Sana, my colleague, had just left. And you came over and you said, do you mind if I have a meeting at the end of this table? And I was like, yeah, of course you can have a meeting on the end of this table. I was ploughing through emails. And a gentleman from the Australian High Commission turned up, and I saw you guys get together, and I almost put my headphones in. I was like, this looks like it could be really boring. And then for the next 40 minutes, all you did was talk about my absolute passions, which was sport in the community and the problems and where it's going, and then we engaged, and now we're here. So look, as far as sliding doors moments are concerned, I'm really glad we met.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm so thankful for your time today and everything that you've contributed to an industry that I am certainly very passionate about. I hope the sports clubs that have watched today have taken away just one little thing, whether it's a survey, whether it's something about right people in right roles and how we match up those people to those core jobs, or whether it's just about understanding the bigger picture of how sports clubs can grow and sustain through what is going to be a very challenging few years in the community. I'm grateful, I'm sure they are too. Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.